Oh my God, Khawla! What's with you going to go with my American brother? He'll ruin your life. I'm his sister, and I'm your age, and I preferred to study here in Morocco rather than go live with him in that foreign land. The voice of Nada, my cousin and best friend, snapped me out of my daze. She was pacing around my house, angry, throwing my things into my suitcase. I sighed and sat on the bed, looking at her with regret. What's this all about? The family swore they wouldn't let me go to Morocco alone. My grandfather gave me a choice. Either go with Taha or stay with you and wait for a good man. I can't possibly sacrifice my studies and my dream. I remembered what happened downstairs in the living room a little while ago and started to relax. My grandfather was sitting in the living room, holding his cane, and Taha was standing in front of him like an iceberg, always dressed in black. His height was imposing, and the only thing I have in common with him is our eyes. We both have the same green eyes. We're both sweethearts, but the contrast between us is huge. My eyes are always innocent and shy, while his eyes always have that same harsh, unreadable look.
Taha said, "Grandpa, I told you, no, Grandpa. America isn't a place to play around, and I don't have time to deal with little kids there." His deep voice and masculine tone still echo in my ears. When he said that, he glanced at them for a few seconds. I didn't understand that look. It wasn't the look of someone who hates taking his cousin with him. It was a strange look, like he was reading something inside me. A heavy look that made him tremble, and I felt like he wanted to say something, but his features remained impassive. I'm shy and afraid of him anyway. I only see my older cousin, that tough, responsible man I have to be very careful with. Grandpa got up and shouted, "The girl studied hard and got her baccalaureate with a high score, and she wants to continue her studies abroad? You, the man of the family, will take her with you, take care of her, and look after her. Are we going to let her go alone? Either she goes with you and stays under your watchful eye, or there's no studying abroad at all." I saw the cook clench his jaw so tightly his veins stood out. He ran his hand through his black hair and sighed before answering. He raised his eyes again. This time the look was quick, but it held something like a warning, or maybe something else I couldn't explain. He shook his head and said with deadly coldness, as if he were talking to an inanimate object, "Even if she packs her things, we'll fly out tomorrow night." I closed my eyes, trying to get this scene out of my head, and he kept knocking at me. I didn't know what awaited me. I thought I was going to study and live a quiet life, like any student, not knowing that this trip and this person I was afraid of hid another world behind it, a world that would turn my life upside down. And then I discovered Taha's face, which no one in the family knew. Night fell, and the sound of the tires of a large black car could be heard. It stopped in front of the villa's door. Taha was standing by the door, wearing a black t-shirt tightly draped over his shoulders and dark jeans, looking at his watch with a blank expression. The driver who had come to take them got out quickly, bowing his head with excessive respect. He took the suitcases without saying a word. The whole family was gathered to put Khawla away. Taha watched this farewell with a heavy gaze, as if he wanted it to end quickly. But his green eyes were watching Khawla's every move, every tear that fell from her eyes as she hugged her mother. He called out, "I'll miss you, and then take care of yourself." I said it while crying. He looked at me and said in a low but firm voice, "Get in, you'll be late for your flight." I got in, feeling my heart pounding. He was startled. He got into the car next to me. It was spacious, but as soon as he closed the door, I felt like the air was thinning, and the strong smell of his cologne filled the air. All the way to the airport, neither of us spoke. He was on his phone, scrolling through messages with a serious expression, while I watched from the window, saying goodbye to my country and repeating to myself, Sabri Khawla, all this is for your studies and your future. Just put up with this guy and ignore him. The important thing is that you achieve what you want.
At the airport, everything happened quickly. The driver stayed with us until we were finished, and we were all snug like beds. I sat next to him, nervously wringing my hands because the fear of the plane was mixed with the fear of this man sitting next to me like a statue. Suddenly, I felt him move from his seat, and his broad shoulders blocked my view. I was startled and shrank back in my seat, holding my breath. I saw him very close to me. His features were stern, and his green eyes were focused on something. He was engrossed in his papers and his phone, while I kept looking at the clouds until sleep overcame me, my head resting against the window pane to stay as far away from him as possible. Taha seemed lost in the papers in front of him, but in reality, all his senses were with her. He felt her shrink back when he approached to fasten her seatbelt, and he saw the fear in her eyes. This pleased him in a way, because he wanted her to stay away from him and be afraid of him so she wouldn't dare enter his dark world. But a regular car belonging to some company employees was waiting for two large black tinted SUVs. What made Khawla stop in her tracks and wide-eyed was the sight of those four men in black suits and daggers, who, as soon as they saw Taha coming out, they stood in their place like soldiers and opened the door behind him with great respect. But fear was evident in his expression. Khawla frowned. Suspicion began to play a role. They knew Taha's Moroccan style. The ululations echoed throughout the villa, and the celebratory chants never ceased. Khawla looked like a princess in her white kaftan with free-flowing sequins, her slightly long hair adorned with a gold crown by the wedding stylist. Taha, dressed in a luxurious white jalaba with randa embroidery and a sash over his shoulders, exuded a truly authentic Moroccan air. When they met at the entrance to bring up the workers, Taha couldn't take his eyes off Maria. He took her hands and kissed them in front of everyone, whispering, "Are you sure you're human? Because I think I'm married to an angel." She smiled at him, and they ascended the palanquin. All his bodyguards, dressed in black suits and scattered throughout the wedding to keep watch, watched their posts, marveling at their joy, and unsure if this was the leader the Mafias feared. When they descended and sat in the reception area, Taha, every now and then he'd get closer to her, put his hand behind her back or adjust her waistband. His jealousy hadn't disappeared. He'd pull her close to him to shield her from them with his broad shoulder. They knew Taha's Moroccan style. The ululations echoed throughout the villa, and the celebratory chants never ceased. Khawla looked like a princess in her white kaftan with free-flowing sequins, her slightly long hair adorned with a gold crown by the wedding stylist. Taha, dressed in a luxurious white jalaba with randa embroidery and a sash over his shoulders, exuded a truly authentic Moroccan air. When they met at the entrance to bring up the workers, Taha couldn't take his eyes off Maria. He took her hands and kissed them in front of everyone, whispering, "Are you sure you're human? Because I think I'm married to an angel."
She smiled at him, and they ascended the palanquin.
Prestige and contrast. All his bodyguards, dressed in black suits and scattered throughout the wedding to keep watch, watched their posts, marveling at their joy, and unsure if this was the leader the Mafias feared. When they descended and sat in the reception area, Taha, every now and then, he'd get closer to her, put his hand behind her back or adjust her waistband. His jealousy hadn't disappeared. He'd pull her close to him to shield her from them with his broad shoulder. "People are looking at us," Khawla said shyly, her cheeks flushed. "Who are these people? I only see my beloved next to me. This whole world doesn't matter to me," he answered her, gently running his rough finger along her lips, making her melt on the spot. People were watching and laughing.
The wedding ended at dawn. The whole family bid us farewell with tears and ululations for our honeymoon. Taha had arranged a private plane for us to fly directly to the Maldives for our honeymoon, far from the noise and far from New York and its secrets, which would always remain hidden between us. We boarded the plane. He sat in his seat, and Taha sat next to me. He put his large hand on the seat his son was holding and rested his head wearily on my shoulder. But with one, the comfort was immense. I held his hand that was on my stomach and rested my head on his. I looked out the airplane window at this beautiful country that we were about to leave. I remembered that first day when my grandfather brought me and told me I was going with my cousin. I remembered the fear. I remembered the refrigerator that seemed terrifying to me. I remembered the scissors, the hut, the bullets, and that night of thunder that changed our lives and made us a small family. I closed my eyes and smiled as I heard Taha whispering in my ear with his eyes closed.